back to our hunter-gatherer past, you will find that we worked 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and it wasn't even work. We did things which kept us alive for 2 or 3 hours a day, but those things were part of our cultural life. We probably loved them. We probably really enjoyed hunting and gathering. I mean, after all, that's what people do when they have free time and money. You know, the rich people go hunting and gathering.
We look at people who have broken out of the cycle of being so embedded in work. It's been a crisis in their own life that's brought that about, perhaps, or getting in our cars or getting on the underground and going into work every day. There's lots of other ways we can live our lives, and that's become clear to everybody.
We're not enhancing life, but suppressing the people we wanted to be.
For the sake of income, a job that might be alienating, tiring, work. But this isn't just a kind of cultural problem or a kind of work obsession or ideological brainwashing so that people are obsessed with work. This is really an economic problem. People overwork because they have to make ends meet. The Uber driver who drives around 7 days a week doesn't do it because he's been kind of culturally brainwashed into working hard, but because he has to do that.
It's not just our employers that treat us as only having utility value, but we look at ourselves that way. And without getting too spiritual on you, I think we've got to accept that, we have intrinsic value. You have to earn your keep in order to stay alive, but you don't have to earn your keep in order to be worth something. You come in as a valuable, dignified, conscious human with a soul. And if you can accept that, then everything changes.
Where we find ourselves right now is we have climate breakdown, we have automation, and we have an aging society. We are being forced to rethink our whole value system.
For 150 years, economists have been dreaming of this vision of how we will become so productive eventually that we'll only need to work 10, 15 hours a week in order to acquire the things that we need to live well. And that vision has never come true.
The interesting thing is that as we've transitioned to a digital age, we're still using that extractive, controlling, industrial age model. And so people said that digital would disrupt capitalism or disrupt business, and they're acting like it's some kind of revolution, but it's not. It's an extremely reactionary movement where we're using digital technology to reinforce the same kind of extractive, automating biases of industrialism, only we're doing it on digital steroids.
The state and businesses are working together quite closely to ensure that the economy is profitable for the people who own the stuff, the people who own the capital. And doing that requires you are part of the undeserving poor, you're lazy, and therefore you don't deserve access to the state's resources. And that's obviously something that you see going back, several hundred years, where you had the poor houses and the people that were seen as kind of too lazy to work and forced to take horrible labour in really horrific conditions.
We're using digital technology to reinforce the same extractive, automating biases of industrialism, only we're doing it on digital steroids.
It kind of takes away that economic whip that's behind us when we make choices about where to work, how much to work, and so on. We might make those choices in a more autonomous and thoughtful way with the backing of economic security. Time to think is probably one of the most essential ingredients of freedom. If we see free time in this way, then we might see it as an issue of distributive justice in the same way we see money as an issue of distributive justice. Maybe governments should be thinking about introducing policies to make sure everybody gets their fair share. Time to think is one of the real casualties of today's kind of long hours culture. And I think time to think is really essential for freedom, to think about the roles that you're in, the habits that you have, the priorities that you have. Are they really your priorities? Did you inherit them from somewhere? Without time to think, we have no time to reflect on these things.
Those are the sorts of things that will make people be able to live a life with security and not be forced to work as many hours as they do right now. Got hair? One big factor that we don't talk enough about are some of the economic instruments and measures by which we measure how well we're doing as a society. And one of those, of course, is gross domestic product, or GDP, which is just a sense of adding up everything we've produced. And that may be arms, for instance. It also includes all of the major ways in which we pollute the environment. It is not a measure of success. It's not a measure of well-being of society. It's not a measure of happiness. It's not a measure of health of society, of child poverty. In fact, it takes all of those things out of the equation and makes it even worse. A target that makes us all feel sick.
The easiest way to get off that treadmill is to try not to strive for anything. Most of the things you do, try to do them for their own sake rather than for something else, or you're doing that for something else, because you'll never get there. There is no place to get. The sooner you go, okay, I'm alive right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.